They say every
Take
man
it
has a moment when he
before it's too
stops
late.
running from his
What is it?
past
Why me?
and starts
You're
riding
right. Just
toward it.
go.
All right.
For
I'm on
Cole
it.
Ironhide Brennan, that moment came on a Tuesday morning in March 2024 when a 79-year-old woman walked into his garage
Good
with
to see you, old
$40 in a
friend.
dream
You
that had
too.
been
The bike
dead for
looks great.
28 years.
Just like us.
But let
still
me
running.
take you back.
Ready
24
for
hours
an
before
adventure, my
97
dear?
Harleys
Always
surrounded the
with you, love.
Sacramento federal courthouse
on
in the
tight.
pouring
I
rain.
am.
24 hours before the guns came out
Vaya.
and the sirens screamed, and an old woman named Ruth
Look,
Catherine
vaya.
Sullivan stood in the middle of it all, holding a rusted tin box like it contained the answer to every question that mattered. 24 hours before Cole Brennan had to decide whether keeping a promise to a dead man was worth dying for. The garage sat at the ragged edge of Redding, California, where the town gave up trying to be civilized and let the dust and the desert take over. Cole Brennan had owned the place for 15 years, ever since he stopped pretending he was built for anything other than engines and asphalt and the open road that stretched between them. 5 in the morning, every morning, same routine for 45 years since he joined the Hells Angels at 23. Cole's calloused hand touched the chrome of his 1963 Harley Davidson panhead before his eyes were fully open. The bike sat in the center of the garage like an altar, and in a way it was. He'd bought it in 1976 when he was 20 years old with money he'd earned loading trucks at the lumber mill 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Back then, his hair was black and thick. His back didn't hurt every time he stood up, and he thought freedom meant never having to answer to anybody about anything. 45 years later, his hair was iron gray and thinning. His back reminded him every single morning that he was 68 years old and mortal, and he'd learned that real freedom was something you earned by keeping your word, even when keeping your word might cost you everything you had. The morning light came through the open garage door in dusty beams that looked almost solid in the still air. Cole ran his hand along the panhead's fuel tank, feeling the small dent near the cap where a beer bottle had bounced off it during a party in Bakersfield in 1982. Every scratch on that bike told a story. Every dent was a memory. Every mile was a piece of his life, written in chrome and steel. On the workbench next to a coffee cup that had gone cold sometime around 2 in the morning sat a small metal object that didn't belong in a motorcycle garage. A military dog tag. Stainless steel, worn almost smooth by decades of being carried in pockets and rubbed between anxious fingers during sleepless nights. The tag read Garrett Brennan, USMC, 1968 to 1991. Cole picked it up the way he did every morning and held it to the light streaming through the door. His father, dead 33 years this coming February. Desert Storm, the first Gulf War, Operation Desert Saber. A Marine Corps gunnery sergeant who'd promised to come home and teach his son how to rebuild a carburetor properly, how to read the wind on a long ride through the mountains, how to be the kind of man who kept his promises even when the world gave him every reason not to. Garrett Brennan never came home. The funeral had been late February 1991 under a sky so gray it looked like the color had been leached out of the world. Cole was 35, then already 10 years deep into the Hells Angels Northern California chapter, already building a reputation as a man who didn't back down from a fight and didn't forget the people who'd stood beside him when things got ugly. He'd stood at the graveside in Redding Memorial Cemetery with his mother watching them fold the flag, with mechanical precision, listening to the rifle salute crack across the February sky like the world itself breaking in half. His mother had pressed the folded flag into his hands with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking and whispered through tears, "He was so proud of you, Cole. So proud." But Cole knew better. Garrett Brennan had wanted his son to enlist, to serve, to wear the uniform with honor the way 3 generations of Brennan men had done before him. Instead, Cole had blown out 3 vertebrae in his lower spine in a motorcycle accident at 18 and gotten a permanent medical exemption from service. No uniform, no deployment, no way to follow in his father's footsteps and prove he was made of the same steel. Just engines and asphalt and a guilt that sat in his chest like a stone for 33 years. Cole set the dog tag back on the workbench with the reverence some men reserved for religious icons and turned to look at the other bike in the garage. Another 1963 panhead identical to his own, except this one was falling apart like it had given up on life. Rusted tank eaten through in 3 places. Seized engine that probably hadn't turned over in a decade. Cracked leather seat that looked like it had been left out in the rain for years and then baked in the California sun until all the life dried out of it. He'd put an ad in the Redding Record Searchlight 2 weeks ago, half as a joke, half as a monument to his own nostalgia. Harley Davidson panhead, 1963, needs complete restoration. $40 or best offer. $40 because That's exactly what he'd paid for his first real toolbox in 1976 when he was young and broke, and certain he could fix anything if he just had the right tools. $40 because it was a number that meant something to him, even if it meant nothing to anyone else in the world. He didn't expect anyone to actually show up and hand over money for a bike that was more rust than metal. Who buys a motorcycle for $40? Turned out a 79-year-old widow with steel in her spine and a secret she'd been carrying for 28 years. The taxi pulled up at exactly 11 in the morning, kicking up dust from the unpaved lot outside the garage like a miniature desert storm. Cole was underneath a 1972 shovelhead, replacing a head gasket that had failed 2 days ago when he heard the car door slam with enough force to echo off the garage walls. He slid out from under the bike on his creeper, wiping his hands on a rag that was more grease and oil than cloth, and stepped out into the brutal California sunlight. The woman who emerged from the taxi was small, maybe 5'3" in her sensible walking shoes. She wore a cream-colored cardigan despite the heat that was already pushing 90 degrees, and she carried a purse that looked older than Cole's motorcycle. Her hair was white as fresh snow pulled back in a neat bun, and her face had the kind of deep lines that came from smiling too much and crying when no one was looking and living long enough to understand the difference between the two. But it was her eyes that stopped Cole cold. Blue as a high desert sky, sharp as broken glass. The kind of eyes that had seen too much and remembered all of it and refused to look away. She paid the taxi driver, counting out bills from her purse with the careful precision of someone for whom every dollar mattered, and turned to face the garage. Her gaze went straight past Cole to the broken panhead sitting in the corner like a monument to better days. "That the one in the advertisement?" Her voice was steady, clear, with an East Coast accent that had been softened by decades in California but still lived in the vowels. Cole nodded, suddenly feeling like he was the one being evaluated. "Yes, ma'am." $40, yes, ma'am. She walked past him without waiting for an invitation, moving with the careful grace of someone who'd learned to navigate the world in a body that didn't always cooperate the way it used to. She stopped in front of the panhead and stared at it like she was looking at a ghost, or maybe a gravestone, or maybe both. Cole followed her into the garage, still wiping his hands, even though they were never going to be clean. "Ma'am, I appreciate you coming all the way out here, but I should tell you straight, that bike needs serious work. The engine's completely seized. The tank's rusted through in multiple places. The electrical system is shot. It's not something you just polish up and ride away on. My husband promised me a ride." Her voice cut through his explanation like a knife through butter, quiet but absolutely immovable. "Route 66, all the way from Chicago to Los Angeles. 2,448 miles. He bought a panhead just like this one from an estate sale in Sacramento back in 1989. Brought it home in the back of a borrowed truck and spent 6 months restoring it in our garage. Said when he retired from the Marines, when he'd done his 20 and earned his pension, we'd take 2 weeks off and just ride. No schedule, no plans, no destination except the road itself and each other." She reached out and touched the rusted tank with fingers that trembled just slightly, tracing the Harley-Davidson logo that was barely visible under decades of corrosion and neglect. "He didn't retire," she continued, her voice going softer but no less strong. "Desert Storm, February 1991. Lieutenant Patrick Sullivan, United States Marine Corps. He came home in a flag-draped box instead of on a motorcycle. They buried him in Sacramento National Cemetery with full military honors, while I stood there 8 months pregnant with our son and tried to understand how the world could just keep turning when mine had stopped completely." Cole felt the air go out of his lungs like someone had punched him in the solar plexus. Desert Storm, February 1991. The exact same war, the exact same month that had taken his father and left a hole in his life that 33 years hadn't managed to fill. The woman turned to look at him, and he saw tears standing in her eyes that she absolutely refused to let fall. 28 years I've been waiting. 28 years I've been too scared, too angry, too broken to even sit on a motorcycle. But I woke up 3 months ago on my 79th birthday and realized that if I don't do this now, if I don't take that ride, Patrick promised me, then I never will. And I'll have let him down one more time. So here I am with $40 in a dream that should have died in the Iraqi desert, but somehow survived anyway. She opened her purse with hands that shook just enough to notice and pulled out 2 $20 bills. They were crisp and new, like she'd been to the bank specifically to get them, like this transaction mattered enough to do it right. She held them out to Cole with the dignity of someone offering a king's ransom. Cole didn't take the money. He couldn't. He was staring at her other hand, at the ring on her finger that had caught the light, and sent his heart into his throat. It was a simple gold wedding band, worn thin by decades of wear, but mounted on top of it was something that made his breath catch. A Marine Corps ring, silver and gold, heavy and solid. The eagle globe and anchor emblem, worn almost smooth by time and touch. But it was the inscription on the side, just visible in the morning light, that made everything click into place. He'd seen that inscription before, on a ring just like it, in a photograph his father had kept in his wallet and carried through 3 wars. "Ma'am," Cole's voice came out rougher than he intended, scraped raw by something he couldn't name. "That ring, where did you get it?" She looked down at her hand, surprised, like she'd forgotten she was wearing it after all these years. "My husband's. The Marines gave it back to me with his other personal effects. I've worn it every day since February 12th, 1991. Why do you ask?" "The inscription. Can I see it?" She pulled the ring off slowly, the way you'd remove something precious and irreplaceable, and handed it to him. Cole held it up to the light and read the words engraved on the inside of the band in letters so small he had to squint. "Bravo Company. Semper Fi. 1968 to 1991. Bravo Company." The exact same unit his father had served with for the last 3 years of his life. Cole's hand went to his back pocket, automatically muscle memory from a lifetime of the same ritual, and pulled out the battered leather wallet he'd been carrying since 1985. From the billfold, he extracted a photograph he'd carried for 33 years, creased and faded, but still clear enough to see. 2 Marines in desert camouflage fatigues, arms slung around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera, like they owned the world and the world had agreed. On the back, in his father's tight, precise handwriting, "Me and Sully. Best damn Marine I ever served with. Kuwait, January 1991. Sully, Lieutenant Patrick Sullivan." Cole looked up at the woman, at Ruth Catherine Sullivan, he realized now, and saw his own shock and recognition reflected back in her face. "Your husband and my father," Cole said slowly, each word careful and deliberate. "They served together, same company, same deployment. They died in the same war, probably the same week." Cat, because that's what Patrick had called her in the letters Cole had found in his father's footlocker after the funeral letters Garrett had written, but never sent because Marines didn't talk about feelings, they just felt them, took the photograph with hands that shook harder now. "Garrett," she whispered, staring at the image like it might come to life. Patrick talked about him constantly, in his letters home and the phone calls, when he could get to a satellite link. He said Garrett Brennan was the finest man he'd ever served with, that Garrett had saved his life twice already, and probably would again before they made it home. He said if anything ever happened to him, if he didn't make it back, Garrett would take care of us. That Garrett would keep the promise Patrick couldn't. She looked up at Cole, and something passed between them that didn't need words, didn't need explanation. A recognition of a shared loss, a shared wound that had never quite healed and maybe never would. "But they both died," Kat said, her voice barely above a whisper. "February 10th, 1991. 4:17 in the morning, California time. I got the call from the base chaplain. Patrick and another Marine had hit an unmarked minefield during a reconnaissance mission near the Kuwaiti border. Both killed instantly. The chaplain said Patrick never knew what happened, said it was quick and he didn't suffer. I don't know if that was true or if it was just something they tell widows to help them sleep at night. February 10th, 4:17 a.m. Pacific time. Cole had gotten the call about his father at exactly 6:30 that same morning, 2 hours and 13 minutes later. His mother's scream had woken him from a dead sleep. He'd found her in the kitchen, holding the phone in one hand, and Garrett's last letter in the other, unable to stand, unable to speak, unable to do anything but make a sound like her soul was being torn out through her throat. "My father was the other Marine," Cole said quietly. "Gunnery Sergeant Garrett Brennan. They died together." Kat's hand went to her mouth. The photograph slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the concrete floor like a dying bird. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The garage was silent except for the distant sound of traffic on the highway and the tick-tick-tick of the shovelhead's engine cooling down, and somewhere far away, a bird singing like the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. Finally, Kat bent down with slow care, picked up the photograph, and held it out to Cole with both hands, like an offering. "Then you know," she said. "You know exactly what it's like to have someone promise you tomorrow and then have tomorrow stolen before you could even say goodbye." Cole took the photograph and looked at his father's face. Garrett Brennan had been 46 years old when he died, strong and solid and certain. 22 years younger than Cole was standing here right now. And in the photo, Garrett had his arm around Patrick Sullivan's shoulders, and both of them were smiling, like they believed they were going to live forever, like death was something that happened to other people in other places. Cole made a decision. The kind of decision that changes the trajectory of a life. The kind of decision his father would have made without hesitation. The bike's worth $4,000, Cole said, his voice steady and clear. Maybe five if I put the time and work into it. The $40 price in the advertisement was a mistake. A typo. I meant to write 4,000. Kat's face fell like a building collapsing. She started to fold the two $20 bills back into her purse with hands that couldn't quite grip properly. I understand. I'm sorry to have wasted your time. I should have known it was too good to be true. But, Cole continued, and the word hung in the air like a promise, I'm selling it to you for $40 anyway. Exactly what the ad said, on one condition. She stopped moving, looked up at him with those sharp blue eyes. I teach you to ride it first, properly and safely. 3 weeks of lessons, 2 hours every morning. You learn to handle this machine like your life depends on it, because it will. You learn the weight and the balance and the way it responds to every input. Then when you've proven you can ride it without killing yourself, we fix it up together. You and me. Every bolt and wire and piece of chrome. We restore it the way your husband would have done. And when it's finally ready, when it's perfect and beautiful and worthy of the promise he made you, then you take that ride. Route 66, Chicago to Los Angeles, every mile he wanted to give you. Kat stared at him like he'd just started speaking in ancient Greek. Why would you do that? You don't know me. I'm just a stranger who answered an advertisement. Cole looked down at his father's dog tag sitting on the workbench. At the years stamped into the metal, 1968 to 1991, 23 years of service, 3 of them in hell. Because my father and your husband made a promise to each other, Cole said. Before they deployed, before they knew what was waiting for them in that desert, they made a blood promise. If one of them didn't come back, if one of them died over there, the survivor would take care of the other's family. Would make sure they were okay, make sure they knew they were loved, make sure they understood that the Marine who died was thinking of them at the end. He met her eyes. They both died, so neither of them could keep that promise. But I can keep it for them. 33 years late, but I can still keep it. He held out his hand, calloused and scarred and honest. Deal. Kat looked at his hand, then at his face, then at the broken pan head in the corner, waiting to be made whole again. She set her purse down on the workbench right next to Garrett Brennan's dog tag and pulled out a small tin box. It was old military issue, the kind soldiers used to keep letters and photographs dry in the field during monsoons and sandstorms. The lid was scratched and dented from decades of being carried and opened and closed. Stamped on the front in faded black letters, Semper Fi 1968 to 1991. Before we shake on it, Kat said, her voice careful, there's something you need to know. Something I haven't told anyone, not even my son. She opened the tin box with the reverence usually reserved for sacred objects. Inside were 3 items arranged with the precision of a religious altar. A purple heart medal in its original blue presentation case, the ribbon still bright despite the years. A folded letter yellowed with age and creased from being read 1,000 times. And another letter still sealed in its envelope, with words written on the front in careful block printing, for the son of Garrett Brennan. If I don't make it home. Cole's heart hammered in his chest hard enough that he could feel his pulse in his fingertips. He reached for the sealed letter with hands that wanted to shake, but Kat pulled it back gently. Not yet, she said. First, I need your help with something else. Something my husband asked me to do in his last letter to me. Something I've been too afraid, too angry, too broken to do for 28 years. What is it? Kat's blue eyes met his without flinching. My son is trying to have me declared mentally incompetent. He's got a doctor in San Francisco who says I have Alzheimer's disease. Early stage, but progressing. He's got lawyers and paperwork and expert testimony and a court date 10 days from now. He wants to put me in a home called Golden Horizons and take control of my assets under a conservatorship agreement. Assets that include a 22-acre ranch in Shasta County worth $3.1 million that Patrick left me. Land that's been in his family for 4 generations, going back to his great-grandfather, who homesteaded it in 1887. Cole's jaw tightened. Do you have Alzheimer's? No. Kat's voice was absolutely certain, rock solid. I can tell you what I had for breakfast every morning for the last month. I can recite Patrick's service number from memory. I can name every man in his platoon and tell you which ones came home and which ones didn't. I can remember the exact words he said to me the last time I saw him, before he deployed, I love you, Maggie mine. Keep the home fires burning until I get back. I can remember everything. Everything except how to stop my own son from robbing me blind. Her voice went harder. The diagnosis is fake. My son paid for it. Dr. Marcus Whitfield, board-certified geriatric psychiatrist, Stanford Medical School, charged my son $75,000 to examine me for 30 minutes and write up a report saying I have Alzheimer's when I don't. And if I can't stop him, if I can't prove the diagnosis is fraudulent, I lose everything in 10 days. I lose the ranch. I lose my freedom. I lose the last thing Patrick died to protect. Why would your son do that? Money. The word came out bitter as poison. Vincent is a real estate attorney in San Francisco. Successful, rich, or at least he looks rich. Expensive suits, expensive car, expensive wife who divorced him 2 years ago and took half of everything. He's leveraged to his eyeballs and drowning. And he's already signed a contract to sell my ranch to a development corporation called Cascade Development. They want to build a luxury resort. Golf course, spa, 200 condominiums, starting at $800,000 each. Kat's hands tightened on the tin box. But Patrick's will is ironclad. The land can't be sold while I'm alive unless I explicitly agree to the sale or unless I'm declared legally incompetent by a court. Vincent tried to get me to agree to sell, tried to convince me the ranch was too much work, too much responsibility, too much for an old woman to handle. When I said no, when I told him I'd never sell Patrick's land, he stopped asking. 2 months later, he showed up with Dr. Whitfield and a diagnosis. Cole felt something cold and familiar settle in his chest. The same feeling he got before a fight broke out in a bar. The same feeling he got when someone violated the code. In the biker world, there were rules that mattered more than law. You didn't lie to your brothers. You didn't steal from your family. And you absolutely, under no circumstances, betrayed the people who trusted you. You have proof the diagnosis is fake. Not yet, but I will. I just need time. 10 days. And I need someone who isn't afraid of my son's lawyers or his money or his threats. Kat's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. Someone who understands that sometimes the right thing to do is the hard thing, the dangerous thing. Cole looked at the sealed letter in the tin box. The letter Patrick Sullivan had written to him 33 years ago, before Patrick knew he was going to die, before he knew Garrett was going to die with him. A letter from a dead Marine to the son of his dead best friend. He thought about his father's dog tag on the workbench. About Garrett Brennan keeping his promises even when it killed him. About the code that said you protected your brothers and their families, no matter what it cost. Cole Brennan held out his hand again, steady and sure. Deal. But we're going to need help. And when I say help, I mean the kind that makes lawyers nervous and judges pay attention. Kat took his hand. Her grip was stronger than he expected, firmer, the grip of someone who'd spent 28 years holding everything together by sheer force of will. What kind of help? Cole smiled for the first time that day. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a man who'd been in the Hells Angels for 45 years and knew exactly how to make powerful people very, very uncomfortable. The kind with motorcycles. Vincent Sullivan's BMW 7 Series pulled into the garage lot at exactly 2:30 that afternoon, the engine purring like a very expensive cat, interrupting Cole's fourth attempt to explain to Kat how a motorcycle clutch actually worked. Kat had been doing surprisingly well for a woman who hadn't touched a motorcycle in 28 years. She listened carefully. She asked good questions. She didn't panic when the bike tipped slightly under her weight. And most importantly, she didn't pretend to understand things she didn't, which in Cole's experience put her ahead of about 90% of the people he'd tried to teach over the years. But when the BMW's door slammed hard enough to echo, and Vincent came striding across the dusty lot in his $2,000 charcoal suit, and his barely controlled fury, Kat's hands started shaking on the handlebars so badly she had to let go. Vincent Sullivan was 45 years old and looked like he'd been born wearing a tie and holding a briefcase. 6 feet tall, thin in the way of people who did hot yoga and drank $15 smoothies and counted macros like a religion. His dark hair was styled with product that probably cost more than Cole's monthly electric bill, and he had the kind of tan that came from golf courses and tennis courts. Not from actual work under an actual sun. Mom! Vincent's voice cracked across the garage like a whip. What the hell are you doing here? I've been calling you for 3 hours. Kat straightened on the bike, her chin coming up in a gesture Cole recognized from a lifetime of watching people decide whether to back down or stand their ground. She chose ground. Learning to ride Vincent, like your father taught me. Dad's been dead for 28 years, Mom, and you're 79 years old. You can't just... Vincent stopped, seemed to really see Cole standing there for the first time. His eyes narrowed. Who the hell are you? Cole wiped his hands on his jeans, taking his time, letting the silence stretch. He'd dealt with men like Vincent Sullivan before. Rich men, entitled men, men who'd never had to fight for anything because money smoothed over every rough edge and made every problem disappear. Men who thought the world was supposed to bend to accommodate them. Cole Brennan, I sold your mother a motorcycle. Vincent's face flushed red from his collar to his hairline. You sold... He turned to Kat and his voice went up half an octave. Mom, we've talked about this multiple times. Dr. Whitfield said you're not capable of making these kinds of financial decisions anymore. You can't just go around buying motorcycles from strangers like some teenager with her first credit card. I can do whatever I want with my own money, Vincent. It's not about the money. Vincent's voice rose and Cole saw something flicker in the man's eyes. Panic maybe, or calculation, or both. It's about your safety, your health. You have Alzheimer's disease. The doctor confirmed it. You could hurt yourself. You could hurt someone else. You could get confused and lost and end up wandering the highway at 3 in the morning, not knowing where you are or how you got there. I don't have Alzheimer's. Dr. Whitfield diagnosed you 6 months ago. We have the medical records. We have the cognitive tests. We have the brain scans. The court date is in 10 days and Judge Hartford is going to grant me conservatorship because it's the right thing to do, because I'm trying to protect you from yourself. Vincent's voice softened, went pleading. Mom, please. I know this is hard. I know you don't want to admit you're getting older, that things are changing. But I'm your son. I love you. Let me help you. By putting me in Golden Horizons and selling the ranch to Cascade Development. Vincent's jaw tightened so hard Cole could see the muscles jump. The ranch is too much for you to manage. You said so yourself last year, when the well pump failed and the fence needed replacing. I said it was a lot of work. I didn't say sell it to developers so they can bulldoze Patrick's family home and build condominiums for Silicon Valley executives who want a weekend retreat. It's $3.1 million, Mom. That's not nothing. That's security. That's being able to afford the best care, the best facility, the best everything for however many years you have left. Vincent's voice hardened. And that money is going to be there whether you're in Golden Horizons or living independently, whether you sell the ranch or keep it and watch it fall apart because you're too stubborn to admit you can't handle it anymore. Kat's voice went quiet, but there was steel underneath, the kind of steel Patrick Sullivan must have heard before he proposed. That ranch is Patrick's legacy. 4 generations of his family worked that land, planted those trees, built that house with their own hands. Your father died in the desert protecting this country so that land would still be here when he came home. And you want to sell it so you can pay off your debts and keep your golf club membership. Vincent's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He turned to Cole and all the pretense of concerned son dropped away. How much did she pay you for the bike? $40. 40. Vincent laughed, but there was no humor in it, just jagged edges. You sold a Harley-Davidson motorcycle to a woman with diagnosed dementia for $40. That's textbook elder abuse. That's financial exploitation. That's illegal in the state of California, and I could have you arrested right now with one phone call. Cole took a single step forward. Not aggressive, not threatening, just enough to make Vincent aware that Cole was 6'2", 220 pounds, and had spent 45 years in a world where problems weren't solved or with phone calls to lawyers. Your mother doesn't have dementia, Cole said quietly, evenly. She remembers her husband's serial number. She remembers the names of every single man in his platoon. She remembers the exact date and time she got the call that he was dead. She can tell you what she had for breakfast every single day this month. She remembers more clearly than you do, counselor. So either Dr. Whitfield is incompetent or he's lying. Which is it? Vincent's eyes narrowed. Who the hell do you think you are? Someone who keeps his promises. Your mother's husband and my father served together. Same unit, same deployment. They died together in the same minefield on the same day in 1991. Before they deployed, they made a promise to each other. If one didn't come back, the survivor would take care of the other's family. They both died. So I'm keeping that promise for my father 33 years late. Vincent seemed to struggle for words. That's insane. That's not how the world works. You can't just decide to interfere in a family's private medical and legal matters because of some promise 2 dead men allegedly made to each other 3 decades ago. I did. And unless you've got a court order right now, this instant, saying your mother is legally incompetent, which you don't because the hearing isn't for 10 days, she can make her own decisions, including buying a $40 Harley from a stranger who happens to give a damn about keeping his word. Vincent pulled out his phone. We'll see about that. I'm calling my lawyer right now, and I'm filing for an emergency restraining order. You stay away from my mother. 500 feet minimum. If you violate it, you go to jail. And I'll make sure you never see daylight again. You do that, Cole crossed his arms. While you're on the phone with your lawyer, why don't you call Dr. Whitfield too? Ask him how much you paid him for that Alzheimer's diagnosis. I'm guessing it was a lot more than $40. Vincent went very, very still. His finger hovered over his phone screen. For just a second, his mask slipped and Cole saw something ugly underneath. Something scared. What did you say? You heard me? For a long moment, the two men stared at each other across 10 feet of dusty concrete. Then Vincent's phone rang in his hand, breaking the spell. He looked at the screen and something in his expression changed, tightened. This isn't over, he said to Kat without looking at her. I'm your son. I'm trying to help you. But if you won't let me help you, the court will force you to accept help. For your own good. He turned to Cole. And you're done. I'm filing that restraining order today. 500 feet. If I see you anywhere near my mother, you go to jail. He turned and walked back to his BMW without waiting for a response phone already pressed to his ear, already talking to someone in the urgent tones of a man who just had his plans threatened. Kat watched him go, her face expressionless. But when the BMW disappeared down the road in a cloud of dust and exhaust, she sagged against the panhead like all the strength had gone out of her legs at once. Cole caught her elbow, steadied her. You okay? That's my son, she whispered. I raised him by myself after Patrick died. Worked 2 jobs to keep us fed and housed. Put him through private school because he was so smart, so driven. Worked 3 jobs to pay for his college when he got into Berkeley. I was so proud when he passed the bar exam. So proud when he made partner at his firm, and now he's doing this. People change when money's involved. Not like this. Not Vincent. He was a good boy, a good man. He loved his father. When Patrick died, Vincent was 12 years old and his whole world ended. I thought he'd follow in his father's footsteps. Join the Marines. Serve. Honor his dad's memory. Kat's voice broke. But he went the opposite direction. Law school, corporate law, real estate deals. As far from combat boots and dog tags as he could possibly get. People grieve differently. I know, but somewhere along the way he forgot what Patrick stood for. Forgot about honor and service and taking care of people weaker than yourself. Forgot that being a man means doing the right thing even when it costs you. Her voice went hard. Now he's trying to rob his own mother, and I don't even recognize him anymore. Cole helped her off the bike. You really think the diagnosis is fake? I know it is. I've never been sharper. Never been more certain. But I can't prove it by myself. I need help. I know people. I'm calling a friend tonight. We'll find out. And if it is fake, if we can prove Vincent paid Whitfield to lie. Cole thought about the sealed letter in Kat's tin box. The one Patrick Sullivan had written 33 years ago to a son he'd never met. The promise he'd made to Garrett Brennan. If it's fake, Cole said, then we go to war. Franklin Doc Rhodes lived in a cabin outside Shasta Lake about 30 miles northeast of Redding, where the pine trees grew thick enough to forget the rest of the world existed, and the only sounds were wind and water and the occasional cry of a hawk hunting in the twilight. Doc had been a Navy corpsman in Desert Storm attached to a Marine unit patching up Marines under fire, doing battlefield medicine with whatever he could scrounge while mortars fell and small arms fire cracked overhead. He'd seen things that made sleep difficult even 30 years later, things he didn't talk about even with people who'd been there. When he came home in 1991, he'd gone to medical school on the GI Bill, practiced family medicine in Redding for 25 years, then retired to the woods where the only patients he saw were the occasional hiker with a twisted ankle or a fisherman who'd hooked his own hand instead of a trout. Cole had known Doc since 1995, back when they'd both been younger and angrier and looking for brotherhood in the only place that seemed to make sense. The Hells Angels didn't care if you had nightmares, didn't care if you woke up at 3 in the morning with your heart hammering because a car backfired and for just a second you were back in the desert. They just cared that you showed up when your brothers needed you and that you kept your word and that you didn't run when things got hard. Doc had left the club 10 years ago, same time Cole had started pulling back. Too old for the fights, too tired of watching young men make the same stupid mistakes they'd made. But the bond remained. Some things you didn't forget, some people you didn't abandon. Cole called him from the garage at 8 that night after Kat had gone home in another taxi after the sun had set and turned the sky the color of blood and ashes after the desert air had turned cold the way it always did in Northern California once the sun went down. "I need a favor," Cole said, when Doc picked up on the third ring. "How big?" "The kind that might get complicated." Doc was quiet for a moment. Cole heard the clink of ice in a glass, the creak of a porch chair settling under weight. "Talk to me." Cole told him everything. About Kat Sullivan walking into his garage with $40. About Patrick and Garrett dying together in Iraq. About Vincent and the Alzheimer's diagnosis and the $3 million ranch. And the court date in 9 days and the feeling in his gut that something was very, very wrong. When he finished, Doc let out a long breath. "You want me to evaluate her?" "Unofficially. Just tell me if she's got what that doctor says she's got. And if she doesn't, then we prove it. Before the court date, before Vincent Sullivan steals everything his father died to protect. Cole, if this diagnosis is fake, and I say so, I'm putting my medical license on the line. If the doctor who made the diagnosis wants to fight me on it, it becomes my word against his. And if he's got Stanford credentials and I'm a retired family practice doc living in the woods, guess who the court's going to believe?" "I know what I'm asking." Another silence, longer this time. Then Doc said, "When can she come up?" "Tomorrow morning. Make it 11. Bring her to the cabin. I'll do a full cognitive workup. And Cole, if this goes where I think it's going to go, you're going to need more than just me." "I know." Cole hung up and stood in the garage for a long time looking at the two panheads. His bike restored and perfect, every bolt and wire exactly where it should be. Kat's bike still broken, still waiting, still full of potential that might never be realized if Vincent got his way. He picked up his father's dog tag and held it to the light one more time, reading the inscription he'd memorized 33 years ago. Then he opened his wallet and pulled out the photograph of Garrett and Patrick young and alive and certain they'd see tomorrow. On the back, in his father's handwriting, the words Cole knew by heart. "Miani and Sully. Best damn Marine I ever served with." And below that, added later in different ink, shakier handwriting, like it had been written in a hurry or under stress. "If something happens to me, someone take care of Maggie and the boy." Maggie, that must have been Patrick's nickname for Kat, the name he called her when they were alone together. And the boy would be Vincent, who was now 45 years old and trying to rob his own mother blind. Cole put the photograph back and pulled out his phone. Scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he needed. Luther Wrench McCoy, 72 years old, hands that could rebuild an engine blindfolded in the dark. A man who'd been in the Hells Angels longer than Cole, who remembered when the patch meant something more than leather jackets and weekend rides. Luther picked up on the third ring. "It's late, Cole. I need the brotherhood." Silence. Then carefully, "How many?" "All of them who still remember what the patch means. All of them who understand that brotherhood isn't just about riding together on sunny days." "That's a lot of asking for something you haven't explained yet." "Tomorrow night, my garage, 7 p.m. I'll explain everything then." Luther was quiet long enough that Cole thought the line had gone dead. "Then this better be worth pulling 15 men out of their lives, Cole." "It's a widow," Cole said. "A Marine's widow. Her husband died in Desert Storm same day as my father. And her son is trying to steal everything that Marine died to protect. We've got 9 days to stop him, or she loses it all." "Jesus," Luther said softly. "That's all you had to say." "I'll have 15 men there by 7. Good men, the kind who remember." Cole made 4 more calls that night. Ezekiel Preacher Townsend, who'd found God after leaving the club, but still showed up when brothers needed him because faith didn't replace loyalty. Brutus Tiny Kowalski, 280 pounds of solid muscle and bad knees and unshakable courage. Jasper Hawk Dalton, who'd spent 20 years as a cop in Oakland before the department decided his methods were too old school and showed him the door. And Marcus Shadow Reynolds, who'd been the club's lawyer before he got disbarred for punching a judge who called his client white trash. By midnight, Cole had his crew. 15 men, average age 67, all of them with more scars than sense, and a code that said, "You didn't let the powerful crush the weak." He turned off the garage lights and walked to his truck, but before he climbed in, he stopped and looked back at Kat's panhead, waiting in the corner. In 9 days, either that bike would be roadworthy and Kat would be free to ride it, or Kat would be locked in a nursing home and the bike would sit here gathering rust until Cole couldn't stand looking at it anymore and sold it for scrap. Cole got in his truck and drove home through the darkness, but he didn't sleep. He sat on his porch with a beer he didn't drink and watched the stars wheel overhead and thought about his father. Garrett Brennan had been 46 when he died. Strong, stubborn, the kind of man who kept his promises even when keeping them cost him his life. He'd promised his country 23 years of service. He'd given them every one. He'd promised his wife he'd come home. He'd tried, and he'd promised Patrick Sullivan that if one of them didn't make it back from the desert, the survivor would take care of the other's family. But neither of them survived. Both promises died in the sand. So here was Cole Brennan, 68 years old, picking up a promise his father couldn't keep for a woman he'd met yesterday, because that's what you did when you understood that brotherhood meant something more than just riding together when the weather was good. It meant standing up when everyone else sat down. It meant keeping your word when breaking it would be easier. It meant being the kind of man Garrett Brennan had tried to raise. Doc's evaluation the next morning took 2 hours. He put Kat through memory tests, cognitive assessments, questions designed to expose confusion or disorientation, or any of the 100 warning signs of dementia. Cole sat in the cabin's main room drinking coffee that tasted like tree bark, listening to Kat's steady, clear voice answering every question with perfect accuracy. When they came out, Doc looked tired. He poured himself a cup of the terrible coffee and gestured for Cole to follow him onto the porch where they could talk privately. "She's sharp as a tack," Doc said quietly. "Sharper than me, probably. Sharper than most people half her age. No cognitive decline, no memory loss, no confusion, no disorientation. Whatever Dr. Marcus Whitfield diagnosed her with, it isn't Alzheimer's. It isn't even normal age-related forgetfulness. That woman in there could pass a pilot's licensing exam." So the diagnosis is fake. I can't prove it's fake without seeing Whitfield's actual examination notes and test results and comparing them to what I just observed. But yeah, based on what I've seen, it's fake as a $3 bill. Cole leaned against the porch railing, looking out at the lake. "Can you testify to that in court?" "I can. But Cole, you need to understand what you're up against here. If Vincent Sullivan has money and lawyers, they're going to absolutely destroy my credibility on the stand. They'll say I'm biased because I'm your friend. They'll dig up every mistake I ever made in 25 years of practice. They'll make it look like I'm some burned-out quack living in the woods who can't be trusted to diagnose a common cold. Will they be right?" Doc smiled, but there was no humor in it. "No, but they'll be convincing, and that's all that matters in court." Cole pulled out his phone and showed Doc a screenshot he'd taken from the California Medical Board website. Marcus Whitfield, MD, board-certified in geriatric psychiatry. Practice address in San Francisco. Education credentials from Stanford Medical School. Professional photo showing a distinguished-looking man in his mid-50s with expensive haircut and the kind of smile that probably reassured families while he delivered bad news. "This the doctor?" Doc asked. "Yeah." Doc zoomed in on the photo, studying Whitfield's face like he was trying to remember something. His expression slowly darkened. "I know him. From where medical conference 5, maybe 6 years ago, San Diego, there was a panel discussion on elder care and cognitive decline. Whitfield was one of the speakers. He gave a talk about early intervention strategies in dementia cases, very professional, very polished." Doc's voice went hard. "And afterward, at the hotel bar, I overheard him bragging to another doctor about how much money there was in guardianship cases. How families would pay literally anything to have an official diagnosis that let them take control of a difficult parent's assets." He was laughing about it. Laughing. Cole felt something cold settle in his stomach. He said that out loud. In public, he was drunk, thought he was among friends and fellow professionals. But yeah, he said it. I remember because it made me want to punch him in his perfect teeth. You don't go into medicine to rob people. You do it to help them. Think he'd remember you? Probably not. I didn't introduce myself, just listened and walked away before I did something stupid." Cole put his phone away. "We need proof. Medical records, test results, examination notes, something concrete that shows the diagnosis was fabricated. Those records are protected by HIPAA privacy laws. You can't just walk into Whitfield's office and demand to see them. What if Kat requests her own records, a patient's right to access? She can request them. Whitfield has 30 days to comply under California law. The hearing's in 9 days. Can we get an emergency court order forcing him to turn them over faster? Maybe. But that requires filing a motion, getting a hearing date, Convincing a judge there's urgency, and Vincent's lawyers will fight it every step of the way. By the time we actually get the records through legal channels, the guardianship hearing will be over and done. Cole wanted to put his fist through the porch railing. Every direction they turned, every legal avenue they tried, the system protected Vincent and Whitfield and the people with money and credentials. Meanwhile, Kat Sullivan, a 79-year-old widow who'd done nothing wrong except have a son who valued profit over family, was going to get crushed under the weight of procedures and timelines and rules written by people who'd never had to fight for anything. There's got to be another way, Cole said. Shadow was quiet for a long moment watching the lake. Finally, he said carefully, "There is, but it's not legal." "Tell me." "Someone breaks into Whitfield's office, gets the records, photographs everything, copies the hard drives. We can't use any of it in court because it's illegally obtained evidence. But we can leak it to the press, make it public. Even if the evidence is inadmissible in the conservatorship hearing, the court of public opinion matters. If the San Francisco Chronicle runs a front-page story about a respected psychiatrist falsifying Alzheimer's diagnoses for money, Whitfield's credibility is destroyed. The judge might not be able to use our evidence, but she'll have reasonable doubt about his. You're talking about felony burglary. I'm talking about doing what's necessary to protect a widow from being robbed by her own son. But Cole, listen to me carefully. If you do this and get caught, you're going to prison. Not county jail for a few months. Federal prison. You're 68 years old. You might not come out alive." Cole thought about this. Thought about spending his last years in a 6x8 cell because he broke into a doctor's office to steal medical records. Thought about Kat spending her last years in a nursing home drugged and docile and forgotten because he wasn't brave enough to take the risk. How would someone do it? Cole asked. Hypothetically. Hypothetically, they'd need to know Whitfield's schedule when he's not in the office. They'd need to bypass building security, which means either hacking the electronic system or having someone on the inside who can provide access. They'd need to know where the records are kept, paper files or digital. If digital, they'd need to access Whitfield's computer, which means either knowing his passwords or having software sophisticated enough to break encryption. That's a lot of things that could go wrong. Yeah, which is why I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying it's theoretically an option if you're desperate enough and willing to risk everything. Well, that night, 15 motorcycles pulled into Cole's garage. The sound of 15 Harley engines echoing off the corrugated metal walls was like thunder rolling across the desert, like a promise being kept. Like the old days when the patch meant something and brotherhood wasn't just a word you said, but a thing you lived and died for. Luther Wrench McCoy arrived first, his 1968 shovelhead rumbling like a war drum. 72 years old, hands scarred from decades of engine work and bar fights and building things that lasted. He killed his engine and climbed off the bike with the careful movements of a man whose body reminded him daily that he wasn't young anymore, but refused to accept that he was old. This better be worth it, Cole. It is. One by one, the others arrived. Ezekiel Preacher Townsend on a softail that was older than some of the men in the room. Brutus Tiny Kowalski on a custom bagger that groaned under his weight but never complained. Jasper Hawk Dalton on a police special he'd bought at auction when the Oakland PD upgraded their fleet and sold off the old bikes for scrap. 15 men, combined age over 1,000 years, combined miles ridden somewhere in the millions, combined wars fought too many to count easily, combined arrests in the hundreds, combined regrets enough to fill the garage twice over with room left for more, but also combined loyalty that was unshakable, combined courage that had been proven in deserts and jungles and city streets, combined commitment to a code that said you protected your brothers, you didn't let the powerful crush the weak, and you kept your promises even when keeping them might kill you. Cole stood in front of them and told them about Kat Sullivan, about Patrick and Garrett dying together in the Iraqi desert, about the fake Alzheimer's diagnosis and the stolen ranch, and the court date in 8 days, and the son who was willing to destroy his own mother for money. When he finished, Luther spoke first. You're asking us to go up against a lawyer with money and connections, a doctor with Stanford credentials, a system that's designed to protect people exactly like them, men who will use every resource they have to destroy us. I know. You're asking us to risk our freedom, maybe spend our last years in prison for contempt of court or obstruction of justice or whatever charges they dream up to punish us for getting in the way. I know. Luther looked around the room at the other men. They were all watching him, waiting. He was the oldest, the one who'd been in the club the longest, the one whose word carried the most weight. His decision would set the tone for everyone else. Finally, Luther smiled. It was a hard smile, the kind that came before a fight, the kind that said he'd made his choice and wasn't backing down. Then let's get to work. The plan came together over the next 3 hours, fueled by bad coffee and cold pizza and the kind of focused intensity that only came when old men remembered why they'd joined the Brotherhood in the first place and decided it still mattered. Jasper Hawk Dalton, the ex-cop, would use his remaining contacts in law enforcement to dig into Vincent Sullivan's background. Look for weaknesses, past cases, unhappy clients, ethics violations, anything that could be used as leverage or could establish a pattern of misconduct. Marcus Shadow Reynolds, the disbarred lawyer, would research California guardianship and in conservatorship law, find loopholes, identify procedural requirements that might have been violated, build a legal strategy that could work even if they didn't have hard evidence of fraud. Doc Rhodes would write up his evaluation of Kat in proper medical language, make it official enough to submit to the court if necessary, even knowing it would be challenged and attacked. And Luther would reach out to the other Hells Angels chapters in Northern California. If this went the way Cole thought it might, they'd need more than 15 men. They'd need a show of force, a reminder that some things were more important than laws written by people who'd never had to fight for anything. But first they needed proof, real concrete, undeniable proof that Vincent and Whitfield had conspired to fabricate a diagnosis and steal Kat's property. We need to get inside Whitfield's office, Cole said. Get the medical records, get access to his computer files, get something we can use. That's breaking and entering, Hawk said flatly. Felony burglary. You get caught, you're looking at real time in a real prison. I know. And even if you get the records, they might not prove anything. Whitfield's smart enough to cover his tracks. He's probably got fake examination notes, fake test results, everything documented to look legitimate. Cole thought about this. Then he thought about the tin box Kat carried. The sealed letter from Patrick Sullivan that he still hadn't opened. The Purple Heart. The promise made by 2 Marines who died before they could keep it. There's got to be something, Cole said. Some mistake, some evidence he didn't destroy. We just have to find it. They argued for another hour about methods and risks and probabilities of success. The problem was brutally simple. Vincent had money lawyers, time in the system on his side. They had passion, loyalty, and 8 days. The meeting broke up around midnight. The men filed out to their bikes, one by one, engines firing up and rumbling into the darkness, the sound of 15 Harleys echoing through the Reading night like a declaration that this wasn't over. Luther was the last to leave. He stood by his shovel-head helmet in hand, looking at Cole with eyes that had seen 3 wars and come home from all of them. You know this might not work, Luther said. I know. You know we might all end up in jail, and Kat Sullivan might still lose everything. I know. Then why are you doing this, brother? Why risk everything for a woman you met 2 days ago? Cole pulled out his wallet and showed Luther the photograph one more time. Garrett and Patrick young and alive, and certain they'd live forever. Because 33 years ago, my father made a promise to that man's widow, Cole said, and then they both died before either of them could keep it. I'm keeping it now. Better late than never. Luther studied the photograph, then looked up at Cole. Your father would be proud of you. My father would think I'm crazy. Same thing sometimes. Luther put on his helmet and climbed on his bike. I'll start making calls tonight. If this goes bad, if you need backup, we'll have every brother in Northern California ready to ride at a moment's notice. 50 men, 100 if we need them. You understand what I'm saying? Cole understood. Hell's Angels didn't do anything small. If this turned into a real fight, it wouldn't be 15 men standing outside a courthouse. It would be 100 motorcycles, 200 men, all of them willing to stand between Kat Sullivan and the people trying to rob her. I understand. Luther kicked his bike to life, the shovel head roaring in the quiet night. Then good luck, brother, and don't get caught. He rode off into the darkness, taillights disappearing down the road, leaving Cole alone in the garage with 2 panheads and a promise that was 33 years overdue. The next morning, Cole made 2 phone calls. The first was to Dmitry Volkov, a name he hadn't spoken in 3 years. Dmitry had been in the club for 10 years before he got kicked out for dealing drugs, not the small-time stuff that everyone looked the other way on, but the kind that landed you in federal prison and brought RICO charges down on everyone you'd ever known. The club had voted him out to protect themselves, and Dmitry had disappeared into the computer security world where hackers with criminal records could make good money if they didn't ask too many questions about who hired them or why. I don't owe you anything, Dmitry said when he answered. 2007, Oakland, outside the Starlight Club. You remember, silence on the line, Dimitri remembered. Cole had saved his life that night, taken a knife wound that required 23 stitches, made sure Dimitri got out of the city before a rival club could finish what they'd started. What do you need? Dimitri's voice was resigned. Building security bypass, medical office in San Francisco Financial District. I need to get in access, computer files, get out without being detected. That's felony burglary, Cole. I know what it is. What demo? Because a Marine's widow is getting robbed, and I'm the only one who can stop it. Dimitri was quiet for a long time, then text me the address. Text me. I'll take a look at their security system, remotely tell you if it's doable. But Cole, if you get caught, I was never involved. We never had this conversation. I've got a daughter now. I can't go back to prison. Understood. The second call was to Brutus, Tiny Kowalski. Tiny, your cousins still run that cleaning company in Oakland. Tiny laughed to sound like rocks tumbling in a barrel. Eddie, yeah, he's still cleaning office buildings. Why? Does his company service buildings in San Francisco Financial District? His company does half the commercial real estate in the Bay Area. What are you thinking? Cole told him. Told him about Whitfield's office and the medical records and the 8 days they had left and what needed to happen. When he finished, Tiny was quiet for a long moment. Then, you're asking my cousin to help you commit a felony. Eddie's got a record, Cole. He gets caught anywhere near this kind of thing, he violates parole and goes back inside for the full 20. I'm not asking Eddie to do it, and I'm asking if he knows someone who works in that building. Someone who might be willing to look the other way for 30 minutes. Tiny sighed heavily. I'll call him, but Cole, this is getting crazy. You understand that, right? Breaking into a doctor's office, this isn't brotherhood. This is desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing. Dimitri called back an hour later with good news and bad news. Good news. The building security was basic. Cameras keypad entry motion sensors after hours. He could loop the cameras remotely, give Cole a 30-minute window where the security footage would show nothing but an empty hallway. Bad news, Cole still needed a key code to get into the building. Dimitri couldn't hack that remotely without being physically on site, and he wasn't coming to San Francisco for any amount of money. Tiny called back 2 hours after that. Eddie knows a guy, Tiny said. Cleaning supervisor. Works the night shift in that building. Guy owes Eddie money from a poker game. Enough that he might be willing to work off the debt by lending his keycard for 30 minutes and not asking questions. When Kashim. Friday night, 11 p.m., cleaning crew goes in at 11 buildings empty except for security and the cleaners. Your window is 11:15 to 11:45. 30 minutes. After that, the supervisor needs his keycard back and you were never there. That's 2 days before the hearing. Yeah, better hope you find what you're looking for. Cole spent Thursday teaching Kat to ride on mountain roads up in Lassen National Forest where the highways curved through stands of ponderosa pine and the air smelled like freedom and possibility. Kat rode the panhead, still rough, still not quite right, but getting better every day, while Cole followed on his own bike, watching her lean into curves, accelerate on straightaways, start to become one with the machine, the way Patrick had taught her 35 years ago. At a scenic overlook 3,000 feet up, they stopped and sat on a stone wall looking out at Mount Lassen in the distance. I used to come here with Patrick, Kat said quietly. Before Vincent was born, before the Marines owned his life. We'd pack a picnic lunch and ride up here on summer weekends and spend the whole day just being together. No war, no duty, no worrying about the next deployment. Just us and the road and the mountains. You ever regret marrying a Marine? Every single time he deployed, every single time the phone rang at strange hours and I thought it might be the call telling me he wasn't coming home. Every single time I watched the news and saw body counts and casualty reports and wondered if one of those numbers was my husband. Kat smiled, but it was full of ghosts. But no, I don't regret it. Patrick was a good man, the best man I ever knew. He believed in something bigger than himself, and he died protecting it. How can I regret loving someone like that? Cole thought about his father, about Garrett Brennan dying in a minefield next to Patrick Sullivan, both of them keeping promises to a country that would forget them as soon as the war ended and the news cycle moved on to the next crisis. My father believed too, Cole said, believed so deeply that he left his family and went to a desert on the other side of the world because someone in Washington told him it was his duty. And he died there in the sand. And for what the war ended, Saddam Hussein got executed years later by someone else. Iraq's still a mess. Afghanistan's worse. And my father is still dead, still buried in Reading Memorial Cemetery. and the world moved on without missing a beat. You sound angry. I am angry. I'm angry that good men die for abstractions while men like your son get rich and live forever. Kat reached over and took his hand. Her skin was soft, wrinkled, warm with life. Vincent wasn't always like this. When he was young, when Patrick was still alive, Vincent wanted to be exactly like his father. Wanted to serve, wanted the uniform, wanted to be a Marine. But after Patrick died, something in him broke. He stopped believing in anything except money and success and climbing higher than everyone else so that no one could ever hurt him again. That's not an excuse for what he's doing. No, it's not, but it's an explanation. Kat squeezed his hand. Cole, whatever you're planning to do tomorrow night, and I know you're planning something, I can see it in your eyes, be careful. I don't want to lose you too. I've lost enough people. Cole looked at her surprised. How did you know? I've been around men like you my whole life, Marines, bikers, men who think rules are suggestions, and justice is something you make yourself when the system fails to deliver it. I can see it in your eyes. You're going to do something dangerous tomorrow night, and you're not going to tell me what it is because you think I'll try to stop you or because you want to protect me from being implicated. Will you try to stop me? No, because I know you're doing it for me, and because Patrick would do exactly the same thing if he were here. Kat pulled the tin box from her jacket pocket and opened it with care. She took out the sealed letter, the one Patrick had written to Cole 33 years ago, and held it out with both hands. Read it now. Before you go, read what Patrick wanted to tell you. Cole's hands shook as he took the letter. 33 years. 33 years, this letter had existed sealed in waiting, and now finally he was going to break that seal and read the words a dead Marine had written to him before that Marine knew he was going to die. He broke the seal carefully like breaking a promise and unfolded the paper. Patrick Sullivan's handwriting was neat and precise. Despite being written in a war zone, the letters carefully formed like penmanship still mattered even in the desert. The letter was dated February 8, 1991, 2 days before Patrick and Garrett died. To the son of Garrett Brennan, if you're reading this, it means your father and I didn't make it home from Iraq. I'm sorry for that. Sorrier than you can possibly know. Garrett talked about you constantly. Every night in the tent, every morning over coffee that tasted like dirt, every quiet moment when we weren't actively trying not to die. How proud he was of you. How much he wished you could have served, but understood why you couldn't. How much he wanted to get home and teach you everything he knew about motorcycles and honor and being a man worth knowing. We made a promise to each other, Garrett and I. We made it the night before we deployed over beers in a bar in Oceanside. If one of us didn't come home, if one of us died over here in this godforsaken desert, the survivor would take care of the other's family. Make sure they were okay. Make sure they knew they were loved. Make sure they understood that the Marine who died was thinking of them at the end. But if you're reading this letter, then we both failed that promise. We're both gone. We're both dead. And our families are alone. So I'm asking you, begging you to do what we couldn't. Take care of my wife, Maggie. Take care of my son, Vincent, who will be born 3 months after I die and who I'll never get to meet. Make sure they know they're not forgotten. Make sure they know their Marine came home even if it wasn't the Marine they expected. Your father was the best man I ever knew. He saved my life twice in this deployment alone. Once from enemy fire when a sniper had me pinned, and Garrett came back for me when any sane person would have stayed in cover. Once from myself when I was ready to give up, ready to quit, and he reminded me what we were fighting for and why it mattered. On February 10th, we're scheduled for a reconnaissance mission near the Kuwaiti border. Intelligence says there might be Iraqi units retreating through the sector. It's probably nothing, probably just routine. But if something happens, if something goes wrong, I want you to know something. I stepped on a mine. I felt it click under my boot. I knew I was dead. Your father was 20 feet ahead of me. He could have kept walking, could have saved himself, should have saved himself. Instead, he turned around, came back, tried to find a way to get me off that mine without detonating it. He knew it would probably kill us both. He did it anyway, because that's who Garrett Brennan was. A man who kept his word, even when keeping his word meant dying. I hope you're like him. I hope you're the kind of man who keeps promises even when it costs everything. Take care of my Maggie. Take care of my boy. Semper Fi, Lieutenant Patrick Sullivan, United States Marine Corps. Cole read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. His eyes were wet, but he wasn't crying. Not quite. He saved Patrick, Cole said, his voice rough. My father went back and tried to save him, even though he knew it would kill them both. All these years I thought my father died in an accident. Random bad luck. But he chose it. He chose to die trying to save his friend. All these years, Cole had carried guilt like a stone in his chest. Guilt that he hadn't served. Guilt that he wasn't the man his father wanted him to be. Guilt that he'd let Garrett down by not following in his footsteps. But his father hadn't needed Cole to follow him. Garrett had just needed Cole to understand what mattered, what was worth dying for, what promises meant. Patrick asked me to take care of Vincent, Cole said. Your son, the man who's trying to rob you. Vincent's not who Patrick thought he'd become, Kat said quietly. But that doesn't change what Patrick asked you to do. How do I take care of someone by sending them to prison? Kat looked out at Mount Lassen, at the vast expanse of California wilderness stretching to every horizon. Sometimes taking care of someone means stopping them from becoming something they'll hate themselves for being. Vincent's going down a dark road. If you stop him now, maybe he gets a chance to find his way back to being the man his father hoped he'd be. Cole put the letter in his jacket pocket right next to his father's dog tag. 2 dead Marines, 2 promises, 1 last chance to make it right. Tomorrow night, Cole said, I'm breaking into Dr. Whitfield's office. I'm stealing medical records. If I get caught, I go to prison for the rest of my life, and you lose the hearing and everything your husband died for is gone. And if you succeed, then we have a fighting chance. Kat stood up and walked to the panhead. She climbed on, started the engine with a kick that was getting smoother every time, and looked back at Cole. Then don't get caught. Friday night, 11 p.m. Cole stood in the alley behind the medical building in San Francisco's financial district, wearing all black, carrying a small backpack with the tools he'd need. The city was quiet this late, just the distant sound of traffic and a homeless man singing somewhere 3 blocks over. His phone buzzed. Text from Dimitri cameras looped. Window starts now. 30 minutes. Cole pulled on thin leather gloves and walked to the service entrance. The cleaning supervisor was there looking nervous, holding a key card like it was burning his hand. 30 minutes, the man said. Then I need this back. And I never saw you. Cole took the key card, swiped it. The lock clicked and opened. You never did. Inside the building was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of a floor buffer somewhere upstairs. Cole took the stairs to the 3rd floor, moving quickly but not running, not doing anything that would look suspicious if someone saw him. Suite 307, Dr. Marcus Whitfield, MD. The door was locked. Cole pulled out the lockpick set Dimitri had given him. It took 45 seconds to get the door open. He was rusty. 20 years ago, he could have done it in 20. Inside Whitfield's office was exactly what Cole expected. Expensive furniture, diplomas on the wall from Stanford, a leather chair that probably cost $5,000. The office of a man who'd never worried about money a day in his life. Cole sat at Whitfield's desk and opened the computer, password protected naturally. He plugged in the USB drive Dimitri had given him. A program launched automatically. The screen flickered, then unlocked. Cole opened the file directory and searched for Kat's name. Ruth Catherine Sullivan. Found it. He opened the file. The diagnosis was there, official looking, complete with test results, and cognitive assessments and brain scan interpretations. Everything looked legitimate, too perfect, like someone had taken a template and filled in the blanks. Cole kept searching, and then he found what he was looking for. A subfolder. Hidden. Labeled simply archive_2019. Inside were document templates, diagnosis forms with blank spaces for names and dates, form letters to family members, standardized test result interpretations that could be cut and pasted. And beneath those, a spreadsheet that made Cole's blood run cold. 23 names, 23 elderly patients, each with a diagnosis: Alzheimer's, dementia, cognitive decline, each with a date, each with a notation: conservatorship approved or guardianship granted. And next to each name, a dollar amount. The amounts ranged from $50,000 to $155,000. Payment amounts. Fees. Money Whitfield had been paid to fabricate diagnoses and help families steal from their own parents. Vincent Sullivan's name appeared next to 19 of the 23 patients as the appointed conservator. 19 families, 19 elderly people diagnosed with diseases they didn't have, then robbed of everything they'd worked for by their own children with Whitfield's help. Cole pulled out his phone and started photographing everything: the spreadsheet, the templates, the form letters, every piece of evidence he could find. His phone buzzed. Text from Dimitri, 20 minutes. Cole kept working. He searched for emails, Found a folder labeled VS_correspondence. Vincent Sullivan correspondence. Cole opened it and started reading. Email after email between Vincent and Whitfield, discussing patients, discussing diagnoses, discussing fees and payment schedules, and how to structure things to avoid suspicion. One email from 3 months ago stopped Cole's heart. Vincent Peer, our discussion, Tuesday. I've completed the evaluation for your mother. Diagnosis attached per your specifications. Standard consultation fee of $75,000 plus 5% of realized property value upon successful sale as we agreed. Court documents will be ready by end of week. Best M.W. Vincent's response, perfect. Cascade is offering $3.1 million for the ranch. Your 5% comes to $155,000. Total fee, $230,000. I'll wire the $75,000 retainer today, balance upon closing. Court date set for March 17th. Judge Hartford is hearing the case. Should be straightforward given our previous successes with her. V.S. Cole photographed it all. Every email, every document, every piece of evidence that proved this wasn't just fraud but a conspiracy. His phone buzzed. Dimitri, 10 minutes. Building security, changing shift. Get out. Cole's hands were shaking now, not from fear, from rage. 23 families, 23 elderly people who'd been robbed. How many of them were dead now? How many had died alone in nursing homes believing their minds were gone while their children sold everything and spent the money? He found one more folder. Cascade_partnership. Inside were corporate documents, partnership agreements, financial statements. Dr. Marcus Whitfield wasn't just being paid to create fake diagnoses. He was a silent partner in Cascade Development Corporation. He'd invested $2.3 million in the company. Every property Vincent Sullivan sold to Cascade made Whitfield richer. Every elderly person diagnosed and institutionalized was another property that could be developed, another return on investment. It wasn't just fraud, it was a machine. A system designed to identify vulnerable, elderly people, fabricate diagnoses, steal their property, and profit from development. Cole photographed it all. His phone buzzed again. Dimitri, 5 minutes. Leave now. Cole ejected the USB drive, closed the computer, and stood. He looked around the office one more time at the diplomas and the expensive furniture and the leather chair and felt sick. He was at the door when he heard voices in the hallway. Security. Early. Cole's heart hammered. He looked around the office. One window, 3 stories up. Fire escape visible through the glass. The voices got closer, keys jingling. Cole made a decision. He grabbed a chair, smashed the window, and climbed out onto the fire escape as the office door started to open. Below him, someone shouted. Flashlights, running footsteps. Cole climbed down the fire escape as fast as his 68-year-old knees would let him, jump the last 8 feet to the alley and ran. Behind him, sirens started to wail, radios crackling, shouts of "Stop police." Cole ran 3 blocks before he had to stop, lungs burning, heart hammering. He ducked into a doorway and pulled out his phone. Called Luther. "It's done," Cole said between gasps. "I got it. All of it. Everything we need." "You okay, Amayo?" "Yeah, but they know someone was there. Security saw me. I'm burned." "Get out of the city. Ditch the phone once you're clear. We'll handle the rest." Cole hung up, pulled the battery out of the phone, dropped both pieces in a storm drain 3 blocks apart. Then he kept moving, staying in shadows, avoiding cameras, making his way back to where he'd parked his truck 6 blocks from the building. He reached it, climbed in, and drove. Didn't stop until he was across the Bay Bridge. Didn't breathe easy until he was past Oakland. Didn't slow down until Redding appeared in his headlights 2 hours later. He'd done it. He had the evidence. Everything they needed to prove Vincent and Whitfield were thieves. But he'd also committed felony burglary. And the clock was ticking. The hearing was in 2 days. Saturday morning, 6 a.m. Cole's garage. Luther, Shadowhawk Doc, and 10 other brothers gathered around the workbench while Cole laid out printed copies of the photographs he'd taken. The room was silent as they read. The spreadsheet with 23 names. The emails between Vincent and Whitfield. The partnership documents showing Whitfield's investment in Cascade Development. "Jesus Christ," Shadow said finally. "This isn't just fraud. This is organized crime. RICO territory. This is the kind of thing that brings down entire law firms." "Will it stop the hearing Monday?" Cole asked. Shadow's face fell. "No, not directly. The hearing's in 36 hours. Even if we file emergency motions, even if we contact the FBI, right now the bureaucracy won't move that fast. Judge Hartford will still hold the hearing. She'll still listen to Whitfield's testimony. And unless we can get these documents admitted as evidence, which we can't because they're stolen, she'll probably grant the conservatorship. Then what was the point, Cole asked, anger rising. What was the point of risking everything if it doesn't change anything? It changes everything, Hawk said, just not in the next 36 hours. Cole, look at this. 23 victims, 19 of them connected to Vincent Sullivan, email evidence of conspiracy, financial documents proving Whitfield profits from the thefts. This is enough to put them both away for 20 years. But building a federal case takes time. We don't have time. No, Shadow agreed. We don't, which means we do this the hard way. We show up at the hearing Monday morning with every piece of evidence we have. We dare Judge Hartford to ignore it. We make sure there are cameras there, reporters, witnesses. We make it public. And if she still grants the conservatorship, we go nuclear. We leak everything to every news outlet in California. We destroy Vincent Sullivan and Marcus Whitfield in the court of public opinion. Luther spoke up. How many brothers can we get to Sacramento by Monday morning? Cole looked at him. Why, vowing? Because we're going to need a show of force. We're going to walk into that courthouse with Cat Sullivan with all our evidence, with Doc's evaluation, with everything we have. And we're going to make it impossible for them to sweep this under the rug. We're going to have so many witnesses, so many cameras, so much attention that Judge Hartford will have to think twice before she helps Vincent Sullivan rob his own mother. How many can you get? Luther pulled out his phone. Give me until tonight. I'll have a number by midnight. He walked outside to make calls. The others kept studying the documents, planning legal strategies, figuring out how to package the evidence in a way that would have maximum impact. Cole sat down on a workbench stool, suddenly exhausted. He'd barely slept in 3 days. His hands hurt from where he'd scraped them climbing down the fire escape. His knees ached. His back was killing him. But he had the evidence. He had the proof. 23 families had been robbed, and now he could prove it. Doc sat down next to him. You did good, brother. You got what we needed. I broke the law. You exposed criminals. There's a difference. Well, they're in the eyes of the law, why? Maybe not. But in the eyes of God, in the eyes of your father, yeah, there's a difference. Doc put a hand on Cole's shoulder. Garrett Brennan went back into a minefield to try to save his friend. You broke into an office to save that friend's widow. The law might not see those as the same, but I do. Cole pulled out the letter Patrick had written. Read it again. The words about Garrett choosing to go back, choosing to die, trying to save someone he loved. Because that's who Garrett Brennan was. A man who kept his word even when keeping his word meant dying. Cole had kept the promise. Finally. 33 years late and possibly too late to matter. But he'd kept it. Luther came back inside at 8 p.m. 97. 97 what? Bikes, brothers. I made calls to every chapter in Northern California, explaining what's happening. 97 men confirmed they'll be in Sacramento Monday morning. Average age 67. All of them veterans or sons of veterans. All of them ready to stand with Cat Sullivan. Cole felt something catch in his throat. Luther, don't thank me. This is what we do. This is what the patch means. We protect our own. And Cat Sullivan is one of ours now. Sunday, Cole spent the day with Cat at the abandoned airstrip, teaching her to ride for what might be the last time. She was good now. Really good. Confident and smooth and in control. She handled the panhead like she'd been born to it. Tomorrow, Cole said during a break, a lot of things are going to happen. I know. We're going to walk into that courthouse with evidence that your son has been stealing from families all over California. That he and Dr. Whitfield have been running a fraud conspiracy for years. We're going to expose them. We're going to try to stop the conservatorship. He paused. But Kat, I need you to understand something. If we succeed, if we stop this, Vincent is going to prison. Your son, the boy you raised, he's going to spend the next 20 years in a federal penitentiary. Kat was quiet for a long time. Then Vincent made his choices. He knew what he was doing. He wasn't confused or desperate or forced into this. He chose to steal from his own mother, from other people's mothers and fathers. He chose money over family, over honor, over everything Patrick taught him. She looked at Cole. Patrick asked you to take care of Vincent. This is how you take care of him. You stop him before he destroys himself completely. Maybe in 20 years when he gets out, he'll understand that you saved him. They rode until sunset, the California sky turning orange and gold and red, the desert air cooling as the sun dropped below the horizon. Tomorrow they'd go to war. Tonight they rode. Monday morning, March 17th, 2024. The hearing. Cole woke at 4 a.m., couldn't sleep. Got up, made coffee, walked out to the garage. He touched the panhead one more time, his father's dog tag in his pocket. Patrick's letter against his heart. His phone rang at 6. Luther. 97 confirmed. They're rolling into Sacramento now. Meeting at Capitol Park at 7:30. Then we ride to the courthouse together. Luther, I don't know how to... Don't, just be there. Cole arrived at Capitol Park at 7. Motorcycles were everywhere. Harleys of every make and model filling the parking lots lining the streets. Men in leather vests with patches from chapters all over Northern California. Not just Hell's Angels, other clubs too. Banditos, Mongols, outlaws. Men who spent most of their time hating each other, united for one morning because this mattered more than club politics. 97 men, average age 67, combined military service over 400 years, combined prison time in the decades, combined loyalty infinite. Luther found Cole in the crowd. You ready? Yeah. Then let's go keep your father's promise. At 8:15:97, Harleys fired up simultaneously. The sound was like the world ending and being reborn. Like thunder and promise and rage and hope, all mixed together. They rode through Sacramento in perfect formation. 2 columns, no speeding, no showing off. Just 97 men on 97 motorcycles riding to war. People on the sidewalk stopped and stared. Cars pulled over, news helicopters appeared overhead. The sound echoed off the buildings like a heartbeat, like the city itself waking up and paying attention. They arrived at the Sacramento Federal Courthouse at 9 a.m., 1 hour before the hearing. The courthouse steps were already crowded with lawyers and court staff and reporters who'd somehow heard something big was happening. When 97 Harleys pulled up and parked in perfect formation, the crowd went absolutely silent. Cole killed his engine and climbed off his bike. Kat was waiting at the top of the steps, standing next to Shadow, who was carrying a briefcase full of evidence. Vincent Sullivan was there too, standing with 3 lawyers in suits that probably cost more than Cole's truck. When Vincent saw the motorcycles, saw the men, his face went white. Doctor. Marcus Whitfield stood next to Vincent, looking confident. That confidence evaporated when he saw the crowd. Judge Diane Hartford appeared in the courthouse doorway, flanked by bailiffs. She stared at the scene, clearly trying to process what she was seeing. What is the meaning of this? Hartford demanded. Shadow stepped forward. Your Honor, I'm Marcus Reynolds, attorney for Ruth Catherine Sullivan. I'm here to file an emergency motion to postpone this hearing and request your immediate recusal based on conflict of interest. Hartford's face flushed. On what grounds? On the grounds that your husband, Thomas Hartford, sits on the board of directors for Cascade Development Corporation, the same company that stands to purchase Mrs. Sullivan's property if this conservatorship is granted. You have a direct financial interest in the outcome of this proceeding. You should have recused yourself the moment the case was filed. The crowd murmured. News cameras pushed forward. Reporters started shouting questions. Hartford's eyes went hard. That's a very serious accusation, Mr. Reynolds. It's a very serious conflict, Your Honor. Vincent's lead lawyer stepped forward. Your Honor, this is clearly a delay tactic orchestrated by... We have evidence, Shadow interrupted. He opened his briefcase and pulled out photographs. We have documented evidence that Dr. Marcus Whitfield and Vincent Sullivan have been operating a conspiracy to defraud elderly patients for at least 5 years. We have identified 23 victims. We have emails between Mr. Sullivan and Dr. Whitfield discussing fraudulent diagnoses. We have financial records showing Dr. Whitfield is a silent partner in Cascade Development. We have proof of payments totaling over $2 million. He held up the photographs. The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed everywhere. Reporters surged forward. Whitfield's face went from confident to terrified in 3 seconds. Vincent tried to speak, but no sound came out. This evidence was obtained illegally, Vincent's lawyer shouted. It's inadmissible. It was stolen through an unlawful break-in Friday night. We've already turned copies over to the FBI, Shadow said calmly. It was a lie, but a good one. They opened an investigation Saturday morning. They'll be here any minute to take statements. That was also a lie, but it had the desired effect. Hartford looked like she'd been hit by a truck. Bailiff, clear this courthouse. Everyone out except parties to this case. No, Cole said. Everyone turned to look at him. Cole stepped forward, pulling Patrick's letter from his jacket. You want to clear the courthouse, that's your right as a judge. But first you are going to hear what I have to say, and every camera here is going to record it. Sir, you have no standing in this case, Hartford said. I have every right. My name is Cole Brennan. My father was Gunnery Sergeant Garrett Brennan, United States Marine Corps. He died February 10, 1991 in Desert Storm. He died alongside Lieutenant Patrick Sullivan, who was Kat Sullivan's husband. Before they deployed, they made a promise to each other. If one didn't come home, the survivor would take care of the other's family. Cole held up the letter so the cameras could see it. They both died, so I'm keeping that promise. 33 years late, but I'm keeping it. And I'm here to tell you, Judge Hartford, that Vincent Sullivan has been trying to rob his own mother using a fraudulent medical diagnosis. That Dr. Whitfield has been helping him. That they've done this to at least 22 other families. And that you've been letting it happen because your husband profits when Cascade Development buys stolen property. The cameras were recording everything. Every word, every accusation. This wasn't a courtroom anymore. This was a trial by publicity. Hartford looked at the cameras, at the reporters, at 97 bikers standing silent witness, at the crowd that had grown to hundreds. Her career was over. She knew it. Everyone knew it. She turned to her bailiff. Get the FBI on the phone, right now. Then she looked at Vincent and Whitfield. You two don't leave this building. You're going to answer questions. Vincent tried to run, made it 4 steps before 2 bailiffs grabbed him. Whitfield just stood frozen, all color drained from his face. Hartford turned to Shadow. Mr. Reynolds, I'm postponing this hearing indefinitely pending federal investigation. The petition for conservatorship is denied. Mrs. Sullivan retains full control of her person and property. Kat closed her eyes. Tears ran down her face. Cole walked up the steps and took her hand. It's over, he said. No, Kat said, smiling through tears. It's just beginning. The FBI arrived within 30 minutes. They arrested Vincent Sullivan and Marcus Whitfield on the courthouse steps. Cameras caught everything. The investigation moved fast. Within a week, they'd identified all 23 families that Vincent and Whitfield had targeted. Total value of the fraud, $47 million. Judge Diane Hartford resigned Monday afternoon. She wasn't charged. They couldn't prove she'd known about the conspiracy, but her judicial career was over. The trial took 8 months. Vincent Sullivan was convicted on 19 counts of conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and grand theft, sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. Dr. Marcus Whitfield was convicted on 23 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and corrupt medical practice. He lost his medical license and was sentenced to 25 years. 14 other people were arrested in connection with the conspiracy, including 3 other lawyers, 2 judges who'd approved fraudulent conservatorships, and 6 employees at various nursing homes who'd helped keep victims drugged and compliant. But that all came later. On the day of the hearing, after Vincent and Whitfield were arrested after the cameras left and the crowd dispersed, Cole and Kat stood on the courthouse steps with 97 bikers still waiting. Luther walked over. What now, brother? Kat looked at the men who'd stood with her. Men who'd risked everything for a stranger because it was the right thing to do. Now, Tatu, she said, we ride. 3 months later, Kat's ranch in Shasta County. 22 acres of California beauty, pine trees and meadows, and a view that went on forever. The house Patrick's great-grandfather had built in 1887 still stood solid and true. Kat announced her decision to a crowd of 300 people. The 97 bikers who'd ridden to Sacramento, their families, the 19 other families Vincent and Whitfield had targeted, reporters, veterans organizations. The ranch would become Sullivan Brennan Haven, a retreat for veterans and their families. Free, forever. A place where people who'd served could find peace. Cole would run it with her. The crowd cheered, the bikes roared. It sounded like promise and hope and second chances. That afternoon, Kat climbed on her panhead, fully restored, now perfect and beautiful for the first time since Luther and the brothers had finished the work. Cole climbed on his own panhead. They rode. Not Route 66. Not yet. That would come next month, a 2-week journey from Chicago to Los Angeles, fulfilling the promise Patrick had made 35 years ago. But today they rode through the California mountains, along the coast, through forests and past lakes. 2 panheads. 2 people keeping promises for 2 Marines who died before they could keep them themselves. Behind them, 97 Harleys followed. Brothers, witnesses. Proof that some promises never die, they just wait for the right people to keep them. Epilogue. 3 years later. Sullivan Brennan Haven had welcomed 1,847 veterans and family members. The ranch had grown, 8 cabins now, a workshop where Cole taught motorcycle repair, a memorial garden with 2 names carved in stone, Garrett Brennan and Patrick Sullivan. The Road Guardians, the 97 bikers who'd ridden to Sacramento, became a nonprofit organization working with the lawyers and social workers to identify and stop elder fraud. They'd helped recover over $31 million in stolen assets. They'd sent 22 more people to prison for similar schemes. Vincent Sullivan in prison wrote letters to his mother every week. Kat read them, but didn't respond for the first 2 years. Then slowly she started writing back. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But acknowledgement. A door left slightly open. Patrick asked you to take care of him, Kat told Cole one evening on the porch. You did. You stopped him before he became something he couldn't come back from. Maybe in 15 years when he gets out, he'll understand. Cole stood in the garage one last time before the big ride looking at the two panheads. Both perfect. Both ready. On the workbench, his father's dog tag sat next to Patrick's framed letter. Cole picked up the mind tag, held it to the light. Garrett Brennan, 1968 to 1991. We did it, Dad, Cole said quietly, 33 years late. But we kept your promise. Outside, he heard the sound of a motorcycle approaching. Kat coming back from her morning ride. She rode every day now, rain or shine, reclaiming the freedom Patrick had promised her. She pulled up, killed the engine, climbed off with the easy grace of someone who'd been riding forever. Ready, she asked. For what? Route 66, Chicago to Los Angeles. 2,448 miles. Patrick promised me that ride 35 years ago. Tomorrow we leave. Cole smiled. When do we leave? Dawn, if you're willing. Cole looked at the bikes, at the dog tag, at the woman who'd walked into his garage 3 years ago with $40 and changed everything. I'm willing. The next morning, two panheads rolled out of Redding, California, heading east toward Chicago, toward Route 66, toward a promise that had waited 35 years to be kept. Behind them, 97 Harleys fired up and followed. Because that's what brotherhood meant. That's what promises meant. That's what family meant. They rode through the sunrise, engines rumbling chrome, gleaming the road, stretching ahead like possibility itself. Somewhere in whatever place Marines go when they die, Garrett Brennan and Patrick Sullivan watched and smiled, because their sons, the one who shared blood and the one who shared promises, had finally brought them home.